I married my sister-in-law, following the death of my brother. Everyone believed I was stealing my brother's money, controlling his wife, and controlling his son to do as I pleased every single day. I was working nonstop for my nephew and providing my sister-in-law with free labor. I poured Makoto a glass of milk before bed. At once, he smashed it. My heart pounded, but all I could see was a line of subtitles with many comments. I've become used to them after they've been there for years. Today is Father's Day anniversary. Makoto must miss his dad so much, which is why he especially dislikes his uncle. The female lead is crying outside. She's very sad. She doesn't want to betray her original husband but can't help but admit she likes her brother-in-law. She can only desperately suppress her feelings. These were some of the comments that I found heartbreaking, but I was unmoved by them. 5 years have passed. For 5 whole years I have been working like a beast. I am still an outsider in this family, regardless of what I have done for her and her mother. I don't want to raise someone else's son anymore, regardless of how kind the remarks are. Chapter 1. I turned and walked away after glancing at the broken glass fragments strewn across the floor. I smiled and curled the corner of my mouth, saying, "As you wish, I'll leave tonight." Makoto continued to make a big fuss, yelling, "Get away! Grandma said you're ambitious and want to seize my dad's property. If it weren't for Yo, my dad wouldn't have left me so early." The caricature erupted in Chado's "Please don't make it a male lead." The child's personality is inherited from his mother. He's cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Ignore the fact that this male lead is the female lead's simp. Don't argue with a child about insignificant things. I was irritated by the comments since I couldn't dispute what they were saying, so he stayed compliant to clean up the mess even though he couldn't bear to leave. My twin brother became very ill 5 years ago. As Makoto, who was only 6 months old, was about to lose him, he watched helplessly. With tears in his eyes, he gripped my hand and said, "Brother, you nearly had both legs crippled back then. I saved you. You asked me how I could pay you back, and I didn't answer. Now, brother, I'm pleading with you to look after Makoto, can't you?" I wanted to say no, but then came the onslaught. They claimed that my sister-in-law, Willow, was my destined female lead and that I was the male lead of this world. Victor, the female lead's deceased lover, was my brother. Willow and I became closer after he passed away, eventually becoming the ideal pair. However, I didn't want to be held accountable for my feelings for my sister-in-law. So, I ran away in fear, but Willow fell apart. My parents separated as well. They became ill one by one. Later, my parents sincerely tried to convince me that the family would disintegrate without me. They asked me to help run the business my brother left them for and to help Willow. My mind went back to here and now. Willow quickly snatched up my sleeve after noticing the mess I had left behind. Her slender arms were partially covered by the cuffs of her floral chiffon dress, and her delicate features included crescent-shaped eyebrows, eyes like autumn waters, and silver tassel earrings hanging from her earlobes. "Why are you being so irresponsible? You didn't clean up the glass. What if Makoto steps on it?" she said, frowning, her tone commanding and tinged with resentment. Her combative demeanor irritated me. However, the majority of the barrage focused on Willow's discussion, the female lead. The male lead should never leave the child and broken glass together, no matter how furious he is. What if Makoto is cut? The love of the female lead is ambivalent. On the one hand, she is dedicated to raising her son and pledged to protect this family instead of her ex-husband. She does, however, have feelings for the main character, who has been through a lot over the years. It's uncomfortable for me to watch. As I watch the constant defense of the mother and child, my once calm heart became disgusted. "I don't want to take on this responsibility. I'm not interested in doing anything for you and your son anymore," I said, pushing Willow away. She looked upset and asked, "Why are you saying this? Did your mother-in-law say something?" I laughed and replied, "Yes, she did. She told Makoto that I'm ambitious and after my brother's property." She snorted and said, "You're a grown man. Why are you going against your mother?" I didn't bother to elaborate. Makoto is about to start elementary school. He shouldn't need adults to worry about him anymore. In Chapter 2, I said without emotion, "My brother saved me, and I've repaid him in 5 years." Previously, I took careful care of both mother and son. In addition to leaving the two of them in my care, my brother asked my sister-in-law to take care of the business. This meant that in addition to looking after them in our day-to-day lives, I also had to deal with any problems at the company as soon as they came up. Like a servant, I had to make breakfast for the mother and son every morning, drive Willow to work, and drop Makoto off at school. After that, I went back to the company to work tirelessly for Willow as unpaid labor. I had to take Makoto to piano lessons, swimming lessons, and badminton practice several times a day on the weekends. I also had to put up with my mother's persistent pestering. My mother once called me right away when a friend asked if I wanted to start a business with them, telling me that our family would disintegrate without me, and that I shouldn't associate with strangers. After my brother left, I had to stay and assist Willow and Makoto in running the business. It was draining. Willow's expression softened a little when she saw the weariness and stress written on my face. "Otherwise, you hire a nanny," she said. Oh my God, the female lead has a trastorno obsessive-compulsivo de limpieza. The comments exploded instantly. She hates having to deal with strangers. For the male lead, this is a huge sacrifice. Exactly. She doesn't like her mother-in-law either, but she has no other option. Her mother-in-law lost her eldest son, but her younger son is healthy, so she must feel out of balance. Another person said, "The male lead just needs to hang in there." The end of the tunnel is in sight. It's all wonderful moments after the difficult part is over. I was perplexed by these comments. Can a cut wound really heal? Even if it does, can I ignore all these unsightly scars? I looked at Willow in front of me. Am I really that horrible of a person? She had almond-shaped eyes, peach-like cheeks, a straight, graceful nose bridge, and an all-around vivacious and endearing personality. I used to be really attracted to her. I looked away from her face now and said calmly, "Let's get a divorce. Once you sign the papers, we'll proceed with the divorce formalities." Willow's eyes flashed with surprise, but she quickly recovered her dissatisfied expression and said, "What about Makoto? You promised your brother you'd take good care of him." I said, "The child is growing up and becoming more thoughtful. He might not want to see me every day." Willow gave me a gentle, coquettish shake and explained, "George, if Makoto is making you uncomfortable, I apologize. You know, today is Victor's Memorial Day. Grandma is complaining and the child didn't mean any harm." She rarely showed any tenderness, but she still believed I was just acting impulsively. After all, I had put up with my mother's actions for a long time. She believes that as a man, I ought to be more giving and unendingly accepting of them. I should avoid discussing divorce with her, but I was really determined this time. Suddenly, my mother's frantic yelling could be heard behind me. "George, you damn kid, what are you freaking out about?" Makoto was surreptitiously filming Willow and me with his phone when I turned around. I couldn't speak. Willow had always complied with our mother-in-law's wishes to care for our parents to honor Victor's dying wish. Willow makes him sleep on the sofa tonight. No, kick him out to sleep on the streets. He's truly ungrateful, taking advantage of Victor's legacy and still not satisfied. I don't believe that if he leaves the Wang family, he'll have any good days. The woman on the other end of the phone reprimanded me like a furious lioness. As though she was still waiting for me to initiate contact in order to make amends, she watched helplessly as I packed my bags. What's going on? The male lead shouldn't be this stubborn. He didn't receive much love growing up, which made him timid and insecure. The comments flooded the screen. In order to protect his good-hearted brother, he never rebelled against his family. The female lead swiftly acts adorable with the male lead. Male lead, please console the female lead. He is unaware that you make a special soup for his stomach ailment and that you don't even eat the chocolates he gave you. Give her more attention. She is torn and afraid to express her feelings for you in front of her son and mother-in-law. You should be more understanding of her as a man. Accommodating men simply need to make room for women. Why should people who are accustomed to enduring have to give in without question? I don't think it should be that way. There is some spirit in even the most stubborn people. Nobody will wait indefinitely. I'm no longer interested in Willow, even if everyone says she loves me a lot. That evening, I went back to my room to pack. Willow remained silent. All night long, she sat in silence in the living room. Chapter 3. Early in the morning, my mother came running over again, pointing her finger at my nose and scolding me. "Didn't you say you were getting a divorce? Go now. As soon as the Civil Affairs Office opens, get your divorce immediately." Willow hesitated and said, "Mom, this is between me and George." My mother cut her off directly. "If it weren't for your brother to be gone, what right does he have to marry you? Victor is such a fool, taking in such ungrateful waste, offering his wife and child. He has no real abilities and is always eyeing his brother's possessions. Why is it that while Victor suffered a great misfortune and died from his illness, he's still alive and well sleeping with his brother's wife, bullying his brother's child, and spending his brother's money? He's truly a petty person, taking advantage. George, if you have the guts to get a divorce, don't mess around here." I was speechless and replied, "I never said I wasn't getting a divorce." She gritted her teeth and said, "Then get out quickly. Also, don't even think about your brother's property. That's all left for Makoto, my grandson. You can't take any of it." I laughed and said, "Give it all to him. Make sure none is left for me. Even if some is left, I won't accept it." She was really joking. Divorce from me would most likely make that half-dead business a liability. Who cares? Willow kept her head down and said nothing because she knew her mother-in-law had a weak heart too. "You made Grandma cry. You're a bad person." Makoto, who was holding his grandmother while she defended his mother, glared at me angrily. Seeing this little boy, who had been moody and high maintenance and high consumption since he was in swaddling clothes, made me feel a great sense of relief. Finally, I wouldn't have to look after him. I signed the divorce agreement and turned to go without saying much. Willow, who knew I was unmarried and had nothing in this city, stopped me and asked, "Where are you planning to go?" "Mom is angry. She's been dreaming about your brother recently and feels sad. Can you come back after some time?" she asked, her eyes welling up and her lips gently pressed together. I told her, "Willow, once the bow is drawn, there's no turning back. We'll go our separate ways and pretend we never met." I didn't look at her again after that, nor did I look at the woman who only called me husband when she was affectionate at night. I also didn't look at the mother who just gave birth and didn't raise her child, or the child who had food allergies and needed me to set up his diet. I'm leaving empty-handed. After an hour and a half on the subway, I reached a villa in the city's northern region. How did Willow get this villa? She never pays George a salary because of her mother-in-law. The male lead divorced too impulsively were some of the intriguing remarks that were left in the deluge. A female lead like her finds it easy to find a spouse because she is a wealthy and attractive woman. Don't cry and beg for forgiveness later. Another person said, "You can't blame the male lead, actually." Which man could have stood it when his biological mother reached this point? The main barrier between them is his evil mother-in-law. Another person commented, "But the female lead always hides everything inside making the male lead guess." She hasn't logged off, so the protagonist's relationship can't develop too quickly, or the fans of the original couple will go crazy. Another person responded, "No way. The male lead has a deep affection for the female lead. I'm afraid he'll keep his heart closed off from love and refuse to make amends." In addition to the fact that he still owes his brother a life, I silently examined the soaring stocks on my phone. Without a word, I grinned. By the time I received my degree in finance, I had never experienced a loss on any of my investments. I'm not a fool, but I'm honest. How could I not have a backup plan with so many resources in the company? The people in the barrage insisted that Willow loved me and would fall for my simp-like devotion through our daily interactions. They had no idea that I had never experienced such a feeling. We only got into a car accident while out together in the 3rd year of our marriage. I turned the steering wheel without thinking, protecting her from below. She held me close while I was in a daze, and I heard her heartbreaking cries, "George, wake up! What will I do if you're not here?" Later, when I regained consciousness, I noticed that she had been looking at my brother's memorial photo for a considerable amount of time. According to the barrage, she felt her heart beginning to falter, believing that it was a betrayal of her brother. I couldn't decide if I should be happy or worried. Stealing my brother's woman was never my intention, but as though an unstoppable force were at work, fate had brought us together. I had trouble sleeping that night. My dream was lengthy. In my dream, I was back in my early years. Chapter 4. I was the family's least favorite child. My mother had difficult labor and almost passed away on the operating table when she gave birth to Victor and me. I was in perfect health when I was born, but my brother had congenital heart disease. My father's business was having problems at the same time. My mother attributed my brother's poor health to me, claiming that I had taken in too many nutrients while I was still in the womb. She believed that I was the cause of his suffering and that I had a negative impact on my father's business opportunities. In the hopes that he would remember the family's mission and grow up to be the cornerstone of the Wang family, she gave my brother the name Victor. Everything I did was meant to make room for Victor. I was sent to the country to be looked after by my grandmother before I turned 1. My aunt frequently scolded and beat me because she didn't like having another mouth to feed. My younger self became timid and insecure as my grandmother grew older and my uncle became a quiet man. Victor was rarely brought home by my mother during the new year. He looked like a tiny gentleman in a small suit and black leather shoes. To get a sneak peek, I hid behind the door. I accepted it tremblingly as Victor put a colorful candy in front of me and said, "You're George's little brother, right? I'm your brother. I'll protect you from now on." My aunt's son grabbed a pink candy as I was ready to open it. Victor wanted to assist me in getting it back, but he clutched his chest in agony before he could say anything. "What did you do to your brother?" my mother yelled as she slapped me to the ground without explanation. I spat out a mouthful of fresh blood after my baby tooth was knocked out and onto the floor. Victor pushed her hand away and gave me a tissue to wrap the tooth in after my mother covered his eyes and said, "Don't look, you'll have nightmares tonight." For the first time, a family member expressed regret for my suffering when he said, "I'm sorry, Mom was just too worried about my health." I naturally grew to like my brother a little. Victor asked my mother to send me his new clothes and backpack after he got home. I was overjoyed. I was finally free of wearing old clothes that had been patched up. My parents didn't bring me home until high school, following the death of my grandmother. I lacked a proper upbringing and was timid and insecure. Quite the opposite of Victor, who could ask them anything with assurance. Additionally, I didn't like the cheerful, bright smile he gave my childhood friend Willow. Dingling. I was startled out of my slumber by a harsh ringtone. Willow was calling. She sounded as though she hadn't gotten enough sleep. She asked, "George, where did you put the new earrings you bought me?" I was about to respond when I noticed the flurry of comments. Oh my God, the female lead loves him so much. Even though she's wearing earrings, she's still asking where they are. I paused and said, "Throw them away. Buy new ones yourself." After a while, she realized and asked, somewhat irritated, "George, are you still mad at me?" I appeared uninterested in her question. She went on to mumble, Makoto doesn't like store-bought buns. Can you come back?" But before she could say anything more, I firmly said, "I can't." She responded, "I'm sorry I didn't mean to bother you, but Makoto is used to the breakfasts you make." I was stunned, and I said, "Willow habits can change. You're his mother, so whatever he likes to eat, you just make it for him." I was stunned, and I said, "Why is it such a big deal now? Also, if you can't find something later, don't call me. I'm very busy." Commenting, "Male lead, please don't be so heartless to the female lead," the barrage hurried to her aid. "She couldn't sleep at all because she waited for your call all night. She genuinely loves you, but she's afraid of breaking her vow to always love Victor. Don't push her away, please. How dull. What is true love? Does there even exist something that cannot be felt? Is love that cannot be felt still love? I use my senses to perceive the world, and I make moral judgments based on my likes and dislikes. Something is unknowable if it cannot be known. One should deny its existence since it cannot be known based on personal interests. Otherwise, anything could be taken as true, which could result in self-defeating judgments. To fill the void inside, people may even lie to themselves. Even though it was obvious that she didn't care, I still thought that she was simply uncommunicative and slow to warm up, but that she secretly still loved me. This is not acceptable. Willow has never been there for me, whether it's through my mother's tantrums or Makoto's mischievous antics. Can you love someone and just watch them carry all the burdens alone? Can you bear their selfless sacrifices without expecting anything in return? I have never felt Willow's emotions. Of course, I was unable to sense any feelings she had for me, but I had seen Willow's affection for Victor. She ignored her father Lou's objections to her being with my brother back then. She was adamant about marrying into the Wang family, even if it meant severing her relationship with the Liu family. She became my brother's obedient wife after marriage and gave her all to the family. It was just a night and day difference. Chapter 5. A kindergarten teacher came up to me again shortly after I hung up. "George, you usually make Makoto's lunch. Didn't you bring it today?" she inquired. Makoto inherited Victor's weak constitution, which left him vulnerable to numerous food allergies. I laboriously consulted several experts and created a customized menu for him to assist him with his meals. I replied calmly, "Teacher, Maria Makoto isn't my biological son. I've divorced his mother, so please don't contact me if you have any issues." The comments started to pour in. Si male, lead Makoto can't eat cafeteria food recklessly. He nearly died in the intensive care unit the last time he ate a pastry with peanuts. Makoto must be standing next to his teacher. You deliberately abandoned Mom and me and used psychological tactics to force Mom to beg you. He scolded me angrily, grabbing the phone as soon as he heard what I had to say. My mother must have taught him these logical sentences because he probably couldn't have spoken them on his own. But for the past 5 years, I have been caring for Makoto. Even though we are not blood relatives, I have been committed and hardworking in cultivating a paternal love to raise and educate him. Such care should soften even a stone, but a few words were enough to provoke him. "The male lead is so cold and heartless," was the torrent of criticism I received from the enraged Makoto. Is every man this uncaring? He recently got divorced and is already acting strangely toward the child. Some even defended me by saying, "Isn't your father no longer a man? He's not his biological son and has always been so domineering. Using the child as leverage, I really can't stand such a male. It would have been better if his biological father hadn't died." Even after 5 years of raising him, the child's rebellious attitude persists, and those who defend the original couple are always saying that the male lead is trying to take his brother's woman and property. Why isn't anyone pointing out that his brother is morally manipulating him, forcing him to take care of things at his dying wish? They say he's timid and greedy, using double meanings for everything right. And if I could put up with it, I'd call him a turtle man. And for the first time in the barrage, someone was standing up for me. They've been complaining for a while that I'm too fortunate, have mediocre skills, and have an unlikable personality, but I've managed to become the male lead who chooses the female lead for love, which is something to be thankful for. But from start to finish, nobody asked if I was willing. I said, "Makoto, after all these years, whether you think I'm pretending or not, did I treat you like my own? Did you ever suffer even a little because of me? You just like to seek attention, pretending not to know and finding faults with me. From now on, you don't need to seek attention with me. I'm not your father, and you don't need to call me. If you have something to say, go home and cry to your mother." I finished my morning routine before heading to get a fitted suit. I entered the headquarters of the shoe group with a confident stride. With gleaming eyes, Anna welcomed me into the office and said, "George, you're finally here." The outpouring of comments began as soon as I saw how elegant and graceful Anna looked. What's going on? Did I miss an important plot twist where a more beautiful character appeared than the female lead? Holy cow, how does the male lead know her? I'm so jealous. I turned to face Anna. She had completely changed from 12 years ago. A slight smile appeared on her lips, and her eyes glistened with a soft light. My grandmother's neighbor's younger sister was named Anna. She was always obedient and followed me around when we were little. I was frequently invited to eat at my mother's house. Following graduation, she and her boyfriend launched a business, which at first went well. Subsequently, I unintentionally found out from my mother that her boyfriend had stolen all of the company's money and run off, leaving her in a difficult situation with a mountain of debt. I recalled the generosity she and her mother had shown us during this time of despair. She wanted me to co-manage the business with her because she was so appreciative, but I never agreed because I was worried it might change the plot. I've had bad luck all my life. Since I didn't want anyone to notice any secrecy, I could only communicate with her in the shadows. I wasn't prepared to wed Willow at the time. However, it seemed as though an unseen hand forced me into the marriage, dragging me into an unrelenting wave that could alter the plot. I was no longer afraid to face it. Chapter 6. Anna wasn't merely engaging in courteous small talk. After our meal, she practically immediately started giving me an overview of the business's operations. My mathematical skills are good. I beat Victor on my first test when I went back to live with my parents in high school. My mother gave me a hard slap on the face when she saw how upset her precious son was. Victor stepped in right away, claiming that he was worse than his brother, who was raised in the country, and that he was a waste of the family's money, not learning anything. I hadn't gotten much love from my family, so I was willing to take any chance for a little sweetness. He handed me a brand new exercise book and said, "George, study hard for me. Our parents' company will rely on you in the future." Like a devoted lapdog, I took the initiative to tutor Victor, who was following him and Willow. He asked if I could stay by his side while he applied to universities because of his health problems. With Willow's unusually expectant expression in her eyes, along with the new clothes and shoes my brother had given me, and the numerous times he had stood up for me in front of our parents, I couldn't help but agree. Anna poked my arm with her hand, just like she used to do when we were kids, after realizing that I was dazed and lost in memories. I avoided looking at her, pinching my temples. Knowing my terrible past in my original family, and that I had been in a daze for the past few years after marrying Willow, Anna said, "It's okay. Everything will be fine." After 5 years of living with Willow and her son, I had gotten into the habit of being busy, so I responded, "Thank you, Miss Shu. I'll do my best." But putting others before oneself is a completely different matter. Despite the fact that both require work, spending time with others usually yields very little sense of value, because no reward is anticipated. People will perceive you as a cheap tool more if you don't expect anything in return. Now, it's different. My returns increase with the number of projects I manage. Once, my mother would ask me if I intended to take my brother's or Makoto's inheritance if I wanted a return. But all I was doing was attempting to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I'm so busy right now that I don't have time to worry about what's going on in the Wang family, so how could that have escalated to such a fallacy? Willow experienced an unbelievable feeling after receiving the divorce certificate. It had been more than a month since George left. Once orderly, the house became disorganized. She employed a butler and a nanny as servants. Makoto, however, was too particular. He loved to have tantrums and wouldn't eat this or that. At the smallest argument, he would smash bowls. Willow recalled that in the past, George was always in charge of Makoto's daily necessities and meals. In the meantime, while complaining nonstop, her mother-in-law would constantly comfort the well-behaved grandson. Images of George's helplessness flashed through Willow's mind as she said, "It must be George who spoiled this child, abandoning the mess and being so inhumane." In this family, mother-in-law Wang would argue with him nonstop if he dared to reprimand Makoto or strike him. She also believed that her stepfather's punishments shouldn't be applied to her son. The kindergarten teacher now complained every few days that Makoto liked to steal art projects from classmates and would weep uncontrollably if she wasn't allowed to. Willow inquired, "Was he always like this?" The instructor responded, "Not really. When Makoto's father was alive, he often brought him a full pack of toys and many impressive art projects, and he told him stories from Journey to the West and Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Makoto would bring these to class to share. His classmates envied him so much that they couldn't wait to get their hands on his toys. He also enjoyed the admiring looks from others." Willow's brows dropped. She had no idea how much George had done for Makoto. The room reverberated with loud slaps. Willow came running in. Mother-in-law Wang, feeling bad, called Makoto's name tenderly as she witnessed him sobbing loudly, pointing at his grandmother and yelling, "Bad grandma, why are you hitting me?" Mother-in-law Wang hated her younger son for replacing the eldest son and was more concerned about other men taking advantage of him. She said, "Makoto grandma didn't do it on purpose, but how could you say something like asking me to bring George back?" She moved into her grandson's home while pretending to be his caregiver, constantly keeping a close eye on them. The precious grandson requested a bedtime story 30 minutes ago. After putting on her reading glasses and sitting by the small bed, Mother-in-law Wang started reading children's books word by word. She read slowly, in a stiff, monotonous voice that was unable to convey George's passion and excitement. Makoto lost patience. The drawn-out stories irritated him. His grandmother had evicted a number of nannies since she moved in, and the food had gotten progressively worse. Even the kindergarten stories he used to brag about were now halting and stuttering. George was a trigger for Mother-in-law Wang, so Makoto pressed his lips together and swore to his grandmother, "It's all your fault getting George to leave and making me embarrassed. Have you forgotten who your real father is? Don't you know how much he contributed to ensure you can easily inherit the family business? Ungrateful brat. How could Victor have a son as heartless as you?" She exploded like a bomb. After she vented her frustration, Mother-in-law Wang pretended nothing had happened, apologizing to Makoto and giving him numerous kisses and hugs. Willow was furious. How could George really divorce her for such a minor issue when they were all family? It destroyed the family's harmony. Was he truly prepared to leave his mother alone and his biological brother's son behind? Being a daughter-in-law is also difficult. Every day she had to observe her mother-in-law's disposition. Chapter 7. At the end of the workday, a red Ferrari pulled up to the company entrance. Why couldn't George be more generous and put up with her and the child's little outbursts? Willow, dressed in a white high-waisted mermaid skirt, leaned against the car. Her features were striking, with delicate eyelids and an almost blindingly alluring presence, and her makeup was flawless. One of my male co-workers said, "Which family's girl is she so impressive?" I turned to go, pretending not to notice. Willow didn't want to have a fit, but George used to worry a lot about her and her son. Willow came over and stood in front of me, frowning, saying, "George, you're being too much. Treating me and Makoto like this, do you want to disturb Victor's peace in the afterlife?" Furthermore, he felt guilty and compromised in every way whenever his brother was brought up. I had no idea what Willow was contemplating. I felt disgusted by her attempt to manipulate me morally. The flurry of comments reminded me that your brother saved you and you slept with his woman. Willow wouldn't have lost her beloved husband if you weren't the male lead. They made me feel thankful and cautioned me against being ungrateful. I don't know how George got involved with Zhu Group, but his elbows don't bend outward, and I don't know what he's fussing about. Other comments read, "What is the male lead doing?" The female lead gave away, "Just take it. He runs around working for other people instead of managing his own business. This man has no vision at all." Another commenter responded, "Even if we take a step back, if Wang Group doesn't pay him a salary, wouldn't that money still end up with his Wang family? He helps Makoto well, but will Makoto be able to support him in the future? You haven't paid back your original man, and it's too tragic, isn't it, to marry a woman who doesn't think of you, but who will always miss her ex-husband?" Another person replied, "Who says the female lead doesn't love him anymore? She's just afraid of betraying her husband." One person responded, "If you can't accept it, don't ruin others by using gratitude to blackmail the male lead into being a beast at the company without expecting a return, or giving him real authority and still helping to support his wife and son. What's that about?" Another asked, "If you die, can you accept your wife being okay with her later husband?" They've been whining for a while that I'm too fortunate, have mediocre skills, and have an unlikable personality. But I've managed to win the female lead's affection, something for which I should be thankful. But from start to finish, nobody asked if I was willing. Makoto, after all these years, whether you think I'm pretending or not, did I ever treat you like my own son? Did you ever suffer even a little because of me? You just like to seek attention, pretending not to know and finding faults with me. From now on, you don't need to seek attention with me. I'm not your father, and you don't need to call me. If you have something to say, go home and cry to your mother," I stated calmly in the comments section. I entered the headquarters of the shoe group with a confident stride. What's going on? Did I miss an important plot twist where a more beautiful character appeared than the female lead? Holy cow. How does the male lead know her? I'm so jealous. Anna greeted me with shining eyes as she said, "George, you're finally here." The barrage of comments erupted when I saw Anna's elegant and graceful appearance. She had completely changed from 12 years ago. A slight smile appeared on her lips, and her eyes glistened with the soft light. My grandmother's neighbor's younger sister was named Anna. She was always obedient and followed me around when we were little. I was frequently invited to eat at my mother's house. Following graduation, she and her boyfriend launched a business, which at first went well. Subsequently, I unintentionally found out from my mother that her boyfriend had stolen all of the company's money and run off, leaving her in a difficult situation with a mountain of debt. I recalled the generosity she and her mother had shown us during this time of despair. Using some of the information and intelligence the barrage had mentioned, I gave her all the information and guidance I had gathered, assisting her in gradually turning the business around and even multiplying its assets multiple times. She wanted me to co-manage the business with her because she was so appreciative, but I never agreed because I was worried it might change the plot. I've had bad luck all my life. Since I didn't want anyone to notice any secrecy, I could only communicate with her in the shadows. I wasn't prepared to wed Willow at the time. However, it seemed as though an unseen hand forced me into the marriage, dragging me into an unrelenting wave that could alter the plot. I was no longer afraid to face it. Chapter 8. I had a rough breakup with Willow. After noticing my negative attitude, Anna wrote to me, "My cousin Martin and his son David have returned to the country. Will you join us in celebrating the little guy's birthday today?" My eyes glowed. Martin, Anna's cousin, is incredibly devoted. When I was younger, a lot of my classmates called me a motherless and fatherless bastard. He taught them a lesson and kept me safe. He would frequently bring snacks to school for me to eat when I was cold and hungry. I had heard that he had taken his child back for a trip while on vacation. I brought multiple sets of children's clothing and some delicate wooden carvings to the hotel. "Long time no see. You look much more energetic and robust now than before." Martin enthusiastically shook my hand as soon as he saw me. Love, it seems, breeds affection for everyone. I gave David a small wooden carving of a fish, and he played with it nonstop. He was very close to me and would share chocolates with me or give me candies, similar to how his father treated me in the past. David took the largest piece of cake and handed it to me, saying, "Dad said thanks to Uncle George, I was able to be born safely." Martin's wife had health problems during her pregnancy with David, and doctors recommended an abortion. I had been caring for Makoto for more than a year at that point. I would take him to the hospital, where I would meet many well-known doctors, because he was weak and ill. When I found out about Martin's predicament, I suggested doctors to help David. David smiled and said, "I really like Uncle George. Can you be my godfather?" "No," Anna answered before I could respond. Anna and I have become very close lately, and David asked, "Why, Auntie?" "I saw a lot of old pictures of Uncle George at your house, and you've kept them so well. Are you trying to make him my uncle? I set up dinners at the Sichuan restaurant she enjoys, and she packs my favorite shrimp dumplings for breakfast." Throughout our 5 years together, Willow has never taken into account my feelings, so I have been the only one to carefully prepare gifts for her and attend to her needs, whether they are related to holidays or everyday life. All of this seems like something a man ought to do. It feels wonderful to share this concern. We have a clear understanding of one another's intentions. Anna claimed, "Without you, there wouldn't be the me I am today." Nevertheless, I thought it was reckless to confess to another girl before I had completely moved on from my previous relationship. Therefore, I will not begin a new relationship before that time. Anna acknowledged this and offered to wait for me. David snorted and said, "That won't happen." I patted his head and told him, "If you keep talking like that, Auntie won't buy you treats next time." David had eaten too much and was having trouble digesting, so he asked me to take him for a walk halfway through. We happened to run into Willow and her son as we were walking past the private room next door. I noticed my parents there when I looked inside. Yes, exactly. My mother's birthday is today. Willow also didn't want to see me on that particular day. I had already run out of patience with their family when my mother asked, "George, what are you doing here?" I remained silent and said, "The restaurant is open for business." I came here to eat, of course. Chapter 9. My mother became furious when she heard me shout, "Persistent spirit! Are you deliberately appearing in front of me, trying to make Willow reconcile with you?" I laughed heartily and said, "Ms. Wang, you're overthinking it." She gritted her teeth and retorted, "Not even calling your mother giving birth to a piece of pork is better than giving birth to you. If it weren't for you, how could your brother have absorbed so little nutrition in the womb and left so early?" Her tirade continued. With all the complaining, my ears were on the verge of becoming calloused. "Apologize to your mother. She talks tough but is soft-hearted. Also go and soothe Willow quickly. She's such a good girl that no one else could marry her. Stop acting foolish." My father stood up and gave me a stern look. Their feelings were complex. They feared I might actually leave, leaving a good daughter-in-law like Willow in the hands of someone else, but they also didn't want me to succeed and overshadow their oldest son. They would no longer have a relationship with the Liu family, and the Wang family's company would be in serious danger. Ultimately, I served only as a tool to hold Willow in place. I curtly said, "No need. I don't deserve such a good girl. Find another father for Makoto." Willow gave me a startled look and said, "George, what are you talking about? Let me find another man. Would you dare?" She seemed shocked that I, who used to be all about her, would suddenly leave. My mother, who couldn't stand my disobedient behavior, yelled angrily, "Get out!" She attempted to push me away by shifting her chubby body. I grabbed David and turned to go because I didn't want to stay. I had gotten into the habit of carving wooden sculptures over the years, but Makoto suddenly yelled, "Why are you holding Uncle's wooden carvings? He hasn't even made them for me this year." I used to personally make one for my mother and son every New Year. Makoto was the one who first saw my earlier works as a child and clung to me because of them. However, he claimed last year that wooden carvings were out of date and that they should not be thrown in the garbage. I was worn out. I didn't want to cause myself any more problems. Rather, he asked me why I gave things to other people but not to him. When I saw Makoto acting like a total brat and reaching for something, I defended David and said, "These things are mine. I can give them to whoever I want." Makoto looked completely wronged and said, "I'm your son." My mother couldn't take it any longer. I didn't put up with her when she stormed out, grabbed my collar and swore, "Are you instigating this behind my back? Victor is Makoto's real father, you bastard." I twisted her wrist and pushed her to the ground without waiting for her to move, but she got up, swore, and attempted to push me once more. When David yelled, "Stop! Don't touch my godfather!" Makoto refused to back down and gripped his wooden carving firmly. We were all four crying at one another. The stairs were close by. My mother, who weighed about 180 pounds and had an unsteady stance, was on the verge of losing her balance. Makoto didn't have the same luck, but I managed to get a firm grip on David. With a loud crash, we rolled down the stairs, his grandmother trailing us like two meatballs. My mother's face was twisted in agony as her bones were broken. Beneath me, Makoto was pinned, his back of his head heavily bleeding. When Willow lifted him up, he gave me a startled and resentful look and asked, "You could have held me back. Why did you choose to save someone else?" In the past, I would have preferred to hurt myself than allow Makoto to get hurt. I calmed the terrified David without giving him a sidelong glance. Makoto was in so much physical and mental pain that he finally lost it and started sobbing aloud. Chapter 10. I visited Martin at the hotel. With great joy, David informed me that his mother was expecting a brother and a sister. He asked, "Is that little brother who wanted to snatch my wooden carving doing okay?" I said, I don't know. Anna, who rarely used her sharp tongue, said, just ignore him, that ungrateful brat who doesn't know gratitude, and almost pushed David down the stairs. David later told us that he had purposefully pushed Makoto toward the stairs when he was attempting to grab the wooden carving. Makoto might not have been pulled into trouble by his grandmother if it weren't for his conceit. He got what he deserved. I ran into Willow on my way out. She no longer had the same radiance and appeared much more haggard. It makes sense. Life would inevitably become chaotic with two injured people in the house, each more problematic than the last. George, why didn't you protect Makoto that day? She asked. But Makoto is your brother's son. You've raised him like the apple of your eye for 5 years. I was stunned. So what? Willow looked at me and said, You've been raising Makoto for 5 years. Whenever he had a scrape, you were so nervous you'd search the medicine cabinet and even carry him to the clinic to check on him. I rubbed my temples and responded, People can change. I've divorced you, cut ties with the family, and Makoto has nothing to do with me anymore. Willow didn't think I had gone completely crazy and insisted that I visit him in the hospital room. Makoto was lying on the hospital bed with his forehead still hurt and his arm dangling by his neck. He turned his head, bit his lip, and looked at me with red eyes, waiting for me to console him the way he used to. Willow bit her lip when she saw that I was unmoved and said, George, don't be so cold. Don't stay indifferent when Makoto is so badly hurt. I was dumbfounded and asked, What else? She asked, Can you care for him like you used to? I said, No, without hesitation. Their expressions darkened instantly. Willow replied, You've been taking care of Makoto for 5 years. He calls you by your name every night. Can't you be less cruel? I chuckled, cruel. For 5 years of marriage, I haven't taken a single penny of your salary as unpaid labor. To put it nicely, it's for the greater good. To put it harshly, it's like working for your brother's son for nothing. Then, what my parents say, I'm greedy and ambitious. He also sees me as an enemy. Makoto has said more than once that I'm not fit to be his father. His dad will always only be Victor. As you wish, I'm leaving. Why are you still entangled? While pushing my mother's wheelchair came into the room. Even worse, she suffered a spinal injury that would limit her ability to stand for the rest of her life after falling down the stairs. George, you made me fall down the stairs. From now on, you must take responsibility for everything. Eating, drinking, eliminating. My mother angrily yelled when she saw me arrive. My father was taking care of her diligently during this time, eager for someone to take over. I felt a wave of unfathomable rage come over me when my father said, George, how can you be so selfish? Knowing how easily your mother gets upset, you still want to anger her. Life at home is tough. Stop playing around outside and come back to take care of your mother. I was so furious that I thought I could just act like a fool. I was smarter than Victor and did better academically when I was in school. However, my parents were never able to recognize my abilities. For fear of upsetting their oldest son, they wouldn't let me outshine him. They still prefer to give the business to outsiders than to allow me any involvement. They didn't realize I was their son until they needed someone to help them in their later years. They yearned for me to return home and serve as their slave. I looked down at my father, who was always so harsh with me, and he said, word for word, I married Willow as you asked, kept the alliance between the Wang and Liu families, saved the company from bankruptcy, and secured investment when the company was short on funds. These are more than enough to repay your so-called costs of raising me. Compared to the efforts you put into my brother, it's just a drop in the ocean. Get out! Mother-in-law Wang roared, get out! Even if the company goes bankrupt and there's no source of income, don't expect me to pay any alimony. You'll be struck by lightning sooner or later. I looked at her cold, icy, and asked, if you despise me so much, why did you even give birth to me? She closed her eyes and remained silent. However, I was aware that there is no justification for hating someone. For instance, hating me because I took in too much nutrition while I was pregnant, which led to Victor's poor health. Or believing me to be vile, but letting me marry Willow with my father's approval in order to keep the two families' alliance intact. Chapter 11. I abandoned this entire family. I won't give anyone my full attention if they don't love me. It's weird to consider. Losing something in the East only to gain something in the West is a scenario that makes me wonder. Anna claims that my investment eye has grown increasingly keen, and that I am highly sensitive to market fluctuations and numbers, able to recognize changes in any industry with ease. Despite the fierce competition in the investment market, I always manage to allocate my funds appropriately. I chuckled to myself and said, "I guess it's just luck." "Not at all," she shook her head. Anna gave me a serious look, her eyes gleaming like tiny stars. She said, tilting her head, "It's undeniably important what a person sees. However, I believe that your commitment is your greatest asset. You will put in extra effort to locate industry reports and policy analysis once you have made the decision to conduct research in a particular area." Her words were like a little hammer, softly cracking open the long, frozen ice around my heart. On the day I married Willow, I gave careful thought to how I wanted to be a good husband and father, not only to look after Willow, but also to run the business for Makoto, so that he could take over smoothly when he grew up. I worked like two people for this, gaining a variety of certifications and learning a lot of new things. However, in retaliation, my parents made fun of me icily. Willow pulled away from me, and Makoto swore at me. They never recognized my worth. Your brother George has passed away. He will always be the true love of Willow, our best son. You can never be comparable. I felt as though I had traveled to a different dimension after the divorce. David was impressed by my wood sculpture's craftsmanship, and Anna commended my investment. It felt great to be acknowledged. It feels so reassuring, like a warm current churning in your heart. Attending a high-profile cocktail party for the first time. I had my hair done in a stylish retro side part and was dressed in a custom-made suit. Anna looked at me for a while putting her arm through mine. She then grinned and remarked, "George, you look so confident now." I used to dress comfortably, not giving much thought to appearances and just doing whatever was practical. However, as my career began to take off, I began to pay attention to my appearance in addition to honing my professional knowledge. I'm working on improving myself every day. I like who I've become. It resembles an ancient sword that has been sheathed and is now shining in the moonlight after its rust has been removed. People kept approaching me to say hello and offer flattering remarks as I raised my glass. "George, you're a famous investor now," Anna whispered in my ear as she leaned in. "Who could possibly undervalue you?" I answered. "Thanks so much for Miss Shu's resolute assistance." I gave a small smile, almost like I was a kid again. Before she could jab me in the arm, a chilly voice spoke up from behind. I turned around and saw Willow when the voice asked, "What are you two doing?" She bit her lip as she looked me up and down and said, "If Mom and Dad saw you now, they probably wouldn't even recognize you." Her appearance made me feel nothing. As my investments and reputation have grown recently, so too have the topics that surround me. Willow was also aware of it. She messaged me to check if I was willing to come back and assist with the Wang family business, and to ask if it was true. I paid her no attention. Following our divorce, Willow repeatedly lost significant deals to rivals because she didn't know how to manage the business. The business suffered severe damage. Now that she was in front of me, she said pathetically, "George, I always believed that the company's success was due to the foundation your brother laid. However, after you left, I understood that the business couldn't continue without you keeping everything together." I apologized, George. I scowled in disgust, asking if you would think about giving me another chance. The well-known flurry of remarks suddenly arose in front of me. Oddly enough, it appeared that the remarks had stopped after the divorce because I insisted on not getting married again. "Oh, the barrage is back at last," the comments said. "Is this because the male lead's story has changed? I always felt that the Wang and Liu families accused George of stealing his brother's inheritance and used him as a free laborer for his sister-in-law and the Wang family. They are utterly callous. This is even more intriguing than the initial storyline." I was shocked to see how much more capable and self-assured the male lead had become. I used to be a little shy and reliant on my family. Everyone around me, including the fans in the comments, pushed me to win over my parents so that I could get along with my sister-in-law. They told me that if I could persevere, I would eventually inherit the Wang family's company. They were constantly disparaging me in their remarks. However, things have changed. Chapter 12. When someone gains enough strength, everyone around them is good. All of a sudden, I recalled the proverb, "There are no others outside of yourself." At one point, the onslaught seemed to be telling me that I had to go down a certain route, like a guide to fate. But I'm not going to let other people control me like a puppet. I must change myself before I can change the world and my destiny. In retrospect, I'm proud of myself for persevering in my studies and never giving up. I stood in front of Willow, staring into her bright eyes. "I don't go back to old relationships," I said. "We are no longer connected. We must never cross paths again." "George, it's all my fault," she replied. "You weren't the most significant person in my life, even though you were my husband. I didn't let my feelings out because I still believed that your brother was the person I loved the most. I frequently had trouble sleeping after you left. Makoto also misses you. He used to cry while looking at your picture when Grandma wasn't around. Could you please give us mother and son another chance as a token of appreciation for your brother saving your life?" Willow attempted to play the sympathy card, but she was sadly mistaken. "Don't talk about gratitude," I said. "I never meant to reveal the truth to you. Let's see it together, though, since you've pushed me." In front of Willow, I took out a video and played it. Martin had exacted revenge on the thug who had nearly rendered me crippled. However, I was taken aback to discover that the thug was Victor's disciple. He revealed everything about what had transpired at the time in order to escape additional punishment. Victor was aware that his brother knew how to return kindness, and he knew that he was dying. He purposefully sought me out along with a few of his brothers to intimidate my brother because he didn't want any other man to take his wife or witness his son getting wasted. "Make it convincing," he had instructed them. "Otherwise, my brother won't believe it." They stranded me in an alley, and Victor arrived to save me just before they hit my legs. The thug gave me a locked notebook with Victor's life story in it, saying, "Your brother originally told me to burn this, but I wanted to extort you, so I've been holding on to it until now, just to make sure I believed him." Despite having a broken body, he was intelligent, capable, and well-liked by everyone. Every day, Wang's mother would whisper in his ear that I had depleted my nutrients while I was still in the womb, causing him to be ill for the rest of his life. Victor felt an overwhelming sense of imbalance when he looked at George, who was healthy but had no one to love. "You stole Mom and Dad's love, and you took away the healthy body that should have been mine," he wrote in George. "Why did you have to be born?" Victor was solely responsible for my cousins beating me up at home. Before he sent me the old clothes, they had been left with hospital waste for days. Despite my weakness, my immune system was robust. Victor was enraged. Why was I able to walk in peace under the sun while he was receiving injections in the hospital? When he realized he didn't have much time left, he attempted to ensnare me in a lifelong marriage and hatred. He was aware that a little sweetness from others could inspire someone who had never experienced much love to give their all. The dramatic moment where he entrusted me with his dying son was intended to demonstrate to Willow his reluctance to give up his fatherly love and to demonstrate to my parents his ability to prioritize the family. Taking Willow's hand, Victor begged, "Wife, promise me. You will only have one child in this life, Makoto. I'll see to it that my brother looks after him well for all time." Willow answered, "Okay, since it was all planned. Why would he make Willow get an IUD if he really wanted me to be happy?" He was aware that Willow would eventually be married and that I might have kids of my own. He was forced to use me as a pawn in order to guarantee that Makoto would only be loved as Willow's child, and that she would be acknowledged as the Wang family heir. Only in this manner would his son inherit everything in the future. Chapter 13. The Ugly Truth. Oh my God, my faith has been shattered. I've been supporting this jerk and even scolding George. I'm so sorry. The outpouring of angry comments was overwhelming. I've always said Victor was morally blackmailing using kindness to seek revenge. However, nobody took me seriously. Fortunately, the main character defied the plot, refused to be constrained by his birth family, and resisted moral manipulation. He has entered a new phase of his life. Willow clutched the diary until her fingers went white. She had no idea that her cherished husband, who had been so affectionate and caring, had such a filthy heart. She chokingly said, "George, you were wronged by Victor. Now I know what I have to do." Willow abruptly returned to the Liu family like a crazy person and broke off all business relations between the Wang and Liu families. My father's managerial abilities were anything but remarkable. He had already ruined the business with the expert CEO he had brought in to cut costs. The business was now in danger of liquidation and bankruptcy. At last, my father became frantic and called me to ask George if Willow's outburst was caused by your refusal to make amends. Go and make amends with her. My biological mother, who's in a wheelchair, said, "As long as you can get Willow to change her mind, I'll consider letting Makoto call you Dad. If you have to kneel, just make sure that the family business doesn't collapse under your father's watch." Their ignorance made me laugh uncontrollably. They were unaware of my ascent to prominence in the investment industry, or that the good wife had already revealed Victor's true character. My parents were sitting quietly on the sofa at the old Wang family mansion. My father suddenly erupted, saying, "It's all your fault. You knew Victor didn't have much time to live, and that George was all that was left, but you still didn't treat him better. Now that George has made more money from a single investment than you will in your lifetime," my mother angrily shot back, "he's my son." The phone rang and displayed the message. "The number you are dialing is no longer in service." What's wrong with me screaming at him? I'll call him and threaten him. If he doesn't give us money, I'll report him. Yes, exactly. It had been more than 800 years since I blocked them. Anna had already foreseen it when they believed they could still make a scene at the company. Before they could even approach, she had the security personnel eject them. Sincerely, I didn't give a damn. I had ample proof that I had been abused by them. The Wang family soon filed for bankruptcy. The maid ran away because Wang's mother couldn't even pay her medical bills. The blow was too much for Wang's father, who was preoccupied with maintaining his dignity. He died from carbon monoxide poisoning after burning charcoal all night. In order to survive, Wang's mother insisted that I send her to the best nursing home. What a dream. I hired a nasty, combative housekeeper to cook for me while I rented a tiny room in the city's village. There is a cycle to fate. Parents must lead by example if they want their kids to respect them. If not, kids will pick up on their parents' behavior and eventually pay the price. Willow spent every day getting wasted at bars following the diary incident. She nearly found herself in a precarious situation on multiple occasions. She persisted in messaging me, saying Victor had lied to her and pleading for another opportunity. It was really exhausting. I blocked her on a ton of different numbers. Summer arrived. I dropped my job and took Anna to the country. I approached her on one knee while holding a bouquet of golden wheat in the moonlight. "Anna, the world is filled with innumerable wheat stalks, and in the silent, desolate fields, wheat grains are planted in the fall when it frosts. As the bright spring arrives, it endures rain, snow, and storms beneath the white snow that is waiting to sprout. There are thousands to harvest from a single seed. I've learned to embrace the cold and always have a grateful heart because of your company and appreciation. I have established a rich life for myself in this world, much like wheat does. I want to continue on this journey with you for the rest of my life." I recalled a quote from the film Under the Tuscan Sun. "There is no doubt that good things will always come. Will you accept this bouquet of wheat from me?" And it's still a welcome surprise when they arrive late. Anna accepted the wheat and the ring with tears in her eyes. A certain type of love can prevent you from ever experiencing pain. And that is the love you repeatedly show yourself. The wind blew across the vast wilderness as the bright moon shone. The wheat's golden waves continued indefinitely. Extra, Chapter 1, of Willow. I never imagined that I would lose George entirely. He became lively and radiant after the divorce. My former mother-in-law harassed me on the phone and insisted that I get a lawyer to sue my son for leaving the elderly. I sneered. There are causes and effects for everything. If I told people, the public's opinion would drown her out first. How could she have gotten to have such a tragic old age if she hadn't committed so many sins in the first 20 years of her life? I was a little envious as I watched George and Anna's lives improve. I allowed my helper to get into my bed. He was kind to Makoto as well. That's why I married him. However, I was surprised by Makoto's level of resistance. He curses the assistant now, just as he used to curse George. Did his biological father's genes not work well enough? Chapter 2. Anna had twins, a girl and a boy. I felt like a rat in the sewers, surreptitiously observing the Shu family's life, and I was furious. How could they have such good genes? I was so stupid that I never gave my heart to George before, but his investment sense continued to grow, and he was on the verge of becoming the richest man in City C. If not, I would now be the envied rich woman. For a moment my heart hurt when I thought about it. Then I could hear Makoto and his stepfather fighting. He was terrible. The man I married had a history of domestic abuse, and when we got married he made it very evident that he liked me for who I am, but now he insisted that I give him daily control over the company's finances. Chapter 3. Uh-oh. The birth control and IUD report in the safe has been found. He wants a divorce. I remembered that George was unaware of this when he was around, so I told him that I didn't want children until Makoto was a little older. He didn't seem very happy, but he went to tell Makoto a bedtime story anyway. I was such a fool, missing out on such a good man. However, just before the divorce, Makoto stabbed his stepfather in the stomach with a knife. He pointed to the rashes on his body and yelled, "You deliberately fed me something I'm allergic to, trying to kill me and steal my dad's fortune." The police looked into it, and they discovered that it was true. One ended up in the hospital, and the other was placed in juvenile detention.